Well, this is Sneaky 25, the kite design I made the other day, and I'm going to make one and show you what I do in making a kite. The first thing is, of course, to select the materials I'm going to use, and in this case I've decided to use a plastic polypropylene film, like a gift wrap film, for the sail. I buy this at papermart.com. It comes in a variety of different patterns, and it comes in this metallic, which is silver on the back and colored on the front, in this case black. Now, because I'm using a plastic film, and cutting a plastic film with scissors or a knife can often cause little nicks to occur where you start and stop the cuts. And those nicks, unfortunately, can cause a complete rip through the material. Usually happens when you least expect it, or certainly when you least want it. So I don't do that. When I use a plastic film, I use a hot cutter, which is really just a soldering iron. This case happens to be rechargeable battery model, but all it does really is melt the plastic as I'm cutting around the template. And when it melts it, it leaves a little bit of the material that's melted along the edge of the kite, which reinforces the edge so it's not as vulnerable to damage. And I've been doing it this way for years, using this same sort of material, and have rarely had any issue with the material giving out, breaking, or becoming damaged. So it's very durable, waterproof, very lightweight, flexible, has all the properties I like in a sail material. So I got the sail, so then I got the spine, which in this case is a 1mm by 5mm flat piece of carbon that I have marked here. Here's where the wingtip line is. From there to the nose, I've sanded it down a little bit so it's a little bit more flexible at the nose area, so it's easier to bend. I have pre-cut my 25-inch piece of 1.5mm carbon fiber. I also have made 4 battens. These are 0.03 inch diameter carbon pieces that I'll put on the sail. You could use 0.8mm or 0.6mm, anything that will add a little stiffness to the area of the sail that you're going to put them on. And then I have cut 2 pieces of tape. These I'm going to use as reinforcing for the nose leading edge. Now I get all these materials together before I start. Then, because I'm cutting it with a hot knife or soldering iron, whatever you want to call it, I use glass as my work surface. And this is a piece of tempered glass, but I'm not sure it needs to be tempered. I just clean it off real well, and then I spray it lightly with water, plain water, nothing else. And I just coat the glass with the water. And the reason is the water helps the plastic film adhere smoothly to the glass. Now, on this sail material, I've already used alcohol and made stripes on the material. So I'm going to lay this down on the wetted surface, smooth it out so all the wrinkles are gone. And when that's done, I'm ready to go. And when I say ready to go, I mean I'm ready to cut out the kite sail. And the nice thing about having it wetted on a surface like this is that after it's cut out, the sail remains flat on the surface, so it makes it easier to install the bow and the spine to finish the kite. So that's another benefit of using a wetted surface. If I'm using a fabric that is got a grid in it or is actually a woven material, I sometimes will do it this way, but sometimes I don't. And if I don't, I just cut it with a razor or X-Acto knife or utility knife, something sharp. So I try to get these out, but I don't want to stretch the material or cause it to be deformed in any way. So it's a little bit of a light kind of rubbing that I do in order to get the air from underneath and yet not distort the material. So once that's done, then I do a couple of things. I guess this will be upside down to you, but what I do is I draw around the template, and that helps me in a couple of ways. One of them is I apply this nose reinforcing tape before I cut out the sail, so I know where that will go when I draw around it. Also, when I make the templates, which I didn't show when I made this, but what I do is I drill small holes on the spine and on all the important areas, like where the battens will go and where the wingtip line is, so that I can use a marker to poke through the holes and mark on the sail material because it helps align the kite if I have to remove the template before I cut it out, and often I do. So once the template is just laid on here, I mark these, and I'm going to use a darker pen for this to show you. I also draw around the perimeter here. Again, this is just to allow me to reposition it accurately if I need to remove it for some reason and then put it back. So I'll have it the same place. So I'll make a mark here to show the nose and mark here to show the tail, just to reinforce the location of it in my own mind. And then I use my ruler and just draw the spine. And I draw the wingtip line. when I've marked what I want to mark right now, I then apply this tape that is a reinforcing tape to the nose area. So here I'm going to put this one on. Now I normally don't put it right up to the spine because I want the sail material to be able to bend around the spine. I'm not sure that's necessary, but that's what I do. And you can see here, when I put this tape on, the tape may go beyond the nose leading edge line a little bit. Partly because I may not have cut it straight, partly because I may not have put it on correctly. But that's one of the reasons that I put it on before I cut the sail, because then I can cut it along with the sail material all at the same time. And it makes it a little bit easier. So now all I do is I replace the template back and align it now. It isn't always perfect there, but and then in this one, this little device has a light, little LED that lights up when it's heating up, and I just go around the perimeter of the sail and I gently lift off the template. Now sometimes, like now, the material will actually bond a little bit to the template edges, so I just carefully remove it, and if it's stuck badly, then I will have to smooth out the sail before I continue on, which is no big deal or anything, it's just part of the process. So now I have this sail cut out, and I have the wingtip marked, the spine marked. Now, normally what I do is install the bow first. So I will do that first, and you can see here on the bow I have two pieces of, this is heat shrink tubing that I glued to the bow at the locations where I want my bridle to be, which is 1.5 inches on either side of the center or either side of the spine. Now I do that ahead of time, so when I install the bow is ready to go and be attached to the bridle without any more fussing around. So I think what I will do in this case, I will install the spine first. Now the spine just goes like that. It's pretty simple. I use contact cement to glue, to bond all of the different kite parts together. It's a Weldwood brand, but probably any contact cement would work equally well. This is just what I have. Now this little bottle here has a brush on it, but if it didn't, I would have an applicator made of foam rubber or something else that maybe a little brush, so I could get it on here fairly uniform and yet not make a big mess of it, which I have never been able to do very much gluing without it being a little messy. So I've just kind of got used to the fact that it's a little messy to use. Now, with contact cement, the instructions tell you to coat both sides, both surfaces you're going to glue, let them dry, and then bond them together. Well, that works really well, and I do that sometimes. But most of the time what I do is I simply glue the spine itself and not the sail. And then while the glue is still wet, which is against the rules of contact cement gluing, I press it down onto the sail and call that good. And it, generally speaking, works out very well. The contact cement really does bond well that way, even though it bonds better when it is put on both surfaces and allowed to dry, and then bonded together. You can see here that the nose is slightly upward. That's because I split the carbon and bent it just a tiny bit at the nose in preparation to make the spine. I split it, separated it, glued it with super glue, clamped to a bent piece of metal that was very, very slightly bent to put this very, very minor bend into the nose of the spine. I'm not sure that's a good idea, but that's what I did in this case. Now when I install the bow, what I do is use what I call a bow setter. And it is the same device I use when I make the pattern or the template. It is, in this case, a piece of aluminum yardstick that I have cut notches along the edges at various distances based on the various kite patterns that I make. So I can use one bow setter for all different kites. But I've also used just a piece of cardboard that's the same cardboard material as my template material, with a notch at each location of the wingtip, and that works just great too, and very simple to make. So once I have this set, I will put a piece of tape on each end of the bow setter to hold it in place. Now I take the bow out and I put a little bit of contact cement on the tips of the bow and along the length of the bow that I'm going to bond to the sail, even though I am not going to bond the rest of the sail right now. I'm only going to bond the tips of the sail right now. But I put the glue on the entire area that I'm going to bond because I am going to allow this glue to dry before I install the bow. I'm not going to do it while it's wet. So I set this aside to dry, and then I apply a little bit of contact cement to these little tabs on the sail material because I'm going to also allow them to dry before I install the bow. Now it takes a few minutes for the contact cement to dry sufficiently. Well, the glue is dried on my bow and on the kite sail tabs here. So now I just insert the tips of the bow into the notches of the bow setter and allow the bow to just naturally fall down onto the sail. Then I fold over the tips here onto the tips of the bow. Now I remove the bow setter Now I apply glue to the rest of the bow that is going to be bonded to the sail. And with this, I don't allow this to dry before I bond the two pieces together. I just do it while it's wet. Contact cement is really a very, very good bonding material for almost any combination of kite parts you might choose. So here I just fold it over, and I'm careful not to distort the shape of the bow. I want the bow to have its natural shape when it's held by the bow setter. So I wrap it around the bow using my fingernail. Now I could use a little tool, but my fingernail seems to work pretty well, and I've used it for years. So now the bow setter is no longer needed, And the kite, for all practical purposes, is completed. I haven't installed the battens yet, but I don't need to do that at this point if I don't want to. I can put them on anytime. It's pretty easy to do. So what I will do now is cut the extra sail material that the tabs of the sail create. I just do that freehand. The hot cutter just melts it. It's pretty simple to do. Now I can lift the kite off of the table, and this is what it will look like. Well, I added the battens, and I added some tape to reinforce areas of a kite that I know from experience can be a little bit vulnerable. Right here at the corner where the bow and the nose leading edge meet is one place. The wingtips themselves, I add a piece of tape because sometimes your flying line gets caught right there, and if you don't have something to reinforce it, it can rip the sail material. And then I put 2 pieces of tape as reinforcement for where I put the bridle holes, which I just melted through the tape and the sail itself. Then I drilled holes through the spine. I doubt you can see them. They're 1 millimeter in diameter, where I'm going to tie my tension line to create the bend I want for the spine. And also I will attach the lower bridle right here where I also put a hole. So the kite is completed except for the bridle and the tension line, which I'll install and go test fly the kite. Well, I put the bridle on the kite, and when I did, I put some super glue right here to bond the lower bridle point, and I put the super glue on the back side of the kite, but it leaked through and made a little place there where it ate away at the ink on the material, so I have a little spot there, but otherwise worked out good. This is the tension line. I used this 3-hole piece of wood that I recently discussed, which is really a simple, easy way to do it. And I put the battens on, and one of the things with glue is that it may adhere to sand or other material, grass or whatever your flying field is made of. So you can coat this area, all these areas that are glued and exposed, with baby powder or cornstarch or something like that, and it'll kill the adhesiveness that remains. And then just brush it all off and it'll be fine. So this is Sneaky 25, my first one, and I'm eager to go out and test fly it. The bridle line I use is a 16-pound test fishing line. It's braided Dacron. It's very thin, And 16 pounds is way more than enough strength to use for bridle, and I also use it for the tension lines. Yesterday I made this Sneaky 25, the first one that I've made, and today I was able to test fly it, even though the wind was much lighter than I would have preferred. The wind was between 0 and about 3 or maybe 3.5 miles per hour. A little bit softer wind than is ideal. But in those wind conditions, the Kite performed very, very nicely. And I think it will do really well in winds up to around 7 or 8 miles an hour.